The oil and gas industry, the home of innovation, cutting-edge technology, and the extraordinary people who make it all happen. Together, we're powering the world. Here are the stories of business builders who are leading the way in the energy sector. This is Zebra Marketing Solutions Oil and Gas Business Builders Podcast, where we explore the real experiences of today's leaders in business growth with key takeaways to start implementing right now in our own companies. And now here is your host, Laura Kamrath.
All right, welcome to the Oil and Gas Business Builders Podcast. Welcome to all our listeners and to Deji Adeyeye, who is here as our guest today. Welcome, Deji. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Yourself?
Awesome. I'm doing well, too. Thanks for being on the show.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce Deji. Mr. Adeyeye is a vice president with Ryder Scott Company L.P., and he is responsible for coordinating and supervising staff and consulting engineers of the company in ongoing reservoir evaluation studies worldwide. Before joining Ryder Scott, Mr. Adeyeye worked with BP, Devon Energy, and Murphy Oil Corporation in both subsurface engineering and leadership roles. He's responsible for the country of Trinidad and Tobago's yearly natural gas audits on behalf of the Trinidad Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, or MEEI. Mr. Adeyeye earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering from University of Lagos in Nigeria, a Master of Science degree in Petroleum Engineering from Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas, and a Master's in Business Administration MBA degree from Rice University in Houston, Texas. Mr. Adeyeye is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas, a project management professional certified by the Project Management Institute, or PMI, and an active member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, or the SPE. He is also an active member of the Society of Petroleum Evaluation Engineers, the SPEE, where he currently serves as the Treasurer Secretary for the Houston chapter of SPEE. He's also professionally qualified as a reserves estimator and reserves auditor for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, or the SPE. Awesome. So that's a pretty impressive bio, Deji.
Thank you.
And Deji and I know each other actually from Rice, where you completed an executive MBA. Am I correct?
I did a PMP, actually.
Oh, you did the PMBA. Okay, so I was also doing the PMBA.
PMBA. That's what they used to call it back.
PMBA. Yeah, I also did the PMBA, and we were in school at the same time, though we weren't in the same class. So it's been a while since I saw you, and great to see you here now. Thanks for being on the show. So tell me, we did our MBAs at Rice, and then I did my undergrad at Mount Holyoke College in Western Mass. Tell me, why did you choose A&M University?
That's a good question. Being originally from Nigeria, Nigeria is a big country. Oil and gas is like one of the main exports for the country of Nigeria. So growing up as a kid, I had dreams of becoming a petroleum engineer. And when I had finished my undergrad, at the time I was working with a company called Texaco Overseas. They've since been bought over by Chevron now. Back then, when I worked in my internship, I had a mentor, and he had advised me to, if I wanted to go ahead and pursue my graduate studies, to consider, actually just told me, go online, do your research. And the top schools that came up at the time were A&M, UT, Colorado School of Mines, and University of Houston as well. It's kind of, in that mix as well. And, you always want to go for the best. At the time, A&M was best. Some people will argue that UT was the best, but I'm kind of biased, so I did the A&M, and I'm glad I did.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a long way to come to go to university. That's good. Awesome. So now you're at Ryder Scott, and you've been there for a while. So tell me, how are things at Ryder Scott, and how long have you been working there?
I joined Ryder Scott back in 2014, April 2014 to be precise. And it's been a really, really good experience. Prior to Ryder Scott, I used to work with, well, I worked at a few of the operators. I worked with BP. That was actually fresh out of A&M. I joined with BP. I worked with BP for 5 years. And then I decided to join up with Devon Energy. And it's funny, cycles in the industry have been in existence forever. And at the time, we had the financial crisis in the industry. So when I joined with Devon, unfortunately, we joined in the financial crisis period. And I was working assets in the Gulf of Mexico shelf at the time. And all the assets, imagine, I'm in a cool job, and I come to the office one day and I read my email and I get this feedback saying all the assets in the Gulf of Mexico are getting sold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was the reality for me back then. But luckily, when we did the divestment, I was able to secure another job at Murphy Oil, and I spent some time with Murphy, 4 years.
Yeah.
I decided to myself, I got the skill set. I did the MBA. I have my PE license. I want to become a consultant, and that was an easy transition for me at the time.
Okay. Yeah. So, so that's why you moved to be a consultant. That's great. So, tell me a little bit about, you've got that experience, but what do you think about new graduates coming out into the oil and gas industry right now? It just seems like a really difficult time. What would you have to say for them?
Wow, it's tough. It's a tough time to be in the industry right now, in the oil and gas business, because even experienced hires with a lot of experience that have something that bring a value to the table, even they are getting a hard time. Even they are having a hard time finding jobs because everybody's trying to cut their costs, their G&A, and it's really tough. So for young graduates coming out of college right now, I would just tell them, work on expanding their skills. They need to work on expanding their skills in other areas, maybe related, because like data science, for instance, is a big thing these days. So they might want to consider taking some, credit courses for data science, which will eventually enhance their skill sets in the petroleum engineering or engineering sphere, as the case may be. Because it's all cyclical. I mean, you have years of boom, years of doom, years of boom, years of doom. 7 years of boom, 7 years of doom. It's all cyclical. So
yeah,
as long as you continue to improve on yourself, even in the down times, those skills that you pick up will always add value to you, when things recover.
Yeah. That's a really good.
A lot more competitive, really. You get a lot more competitive. People trying to hire.
Yeah. So that's a really good point, is just to keep continuing to expand your knowledge and expand your value. And
absolutely.
I mean, it seems like it wasn't long ago when we just recently had the last downturn. So
yeah,
hopefully this isn't becoming just.
Well, it's gonna come again. Like I said, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
You're gonna have years of robustness, and then years of just farming. I mean, it's just bad.
Yeah. So, that being said, we've got this cyclical nature of this industry, which, is always going to be the case. What do you think is the future of the oil and gas industry?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
It continues to evolve. I can remember when I joined with BP in January 2004, oil prices was, in the hundreds or close to something in that range. And everybody, they couldn't pay petroleum engineering enough money because they were just throwing money at them at the time. Mm-hmm. The economy was good. I mean, people thought it was going to last forever, and it shrunk. Actually, around that period, if you look at the S&P 500, the E&P sector at the time was about, I say 25% of the S&P. Now, fast forward, 2020, it's about 5%. So you can see that over time, it will, 16 years or 17 years, it's shrunk dramatically over the time. And that's because Wall Street has lost a lot of a lot of money on betting on, the shale plays and stuff like that. So we've kind of put a bitter taste in their mouth, so to speak. And then you have things like renewables, solar, wind, those technologies, the cleaner technologies that continue to grow. So everybody just, nobody wants the carbon footprint and nobody wants the fossil fuels anymore. So I hate to say this, but it's kind of like a declining industry just based on the trend of, like I said, the S&P 500, we had 25%, 25 something in that range back 16 years ago. Now we're 5% of the S&P. So that's just shrinking.
Yeah.
So, however, I mean, we're always going to be relevant because, until we can find an ideal solution, cars are still going to run in fuel, airplanes, well, of course, also this is after COVID, right? Because COVID has kind of put a damper on everything with the economy because things have to come to a grinding halt. But once the planes start to fly again, the demand and then the factories start to work again at their full capacities, that will drive demand, and then the prices will pick up. Yeah. But long term, I mean, if I was a betting man, actually, if I was a betting man and I need an answer to that question, I'm probably a billionaire right now. So.
Yeah. So that being said, how about your view on the current and future oil prices? What do you think is going to happen with oil prices?
It's a similar thing though. It's all supply and demand. I mean, now because of the lack of demand, so to speak, or the limited demand, the prices are not, they're just going to be soft. And we might see it being soft for at least a year to 18 months.
Yeah.
And then supply, and then you have to think about this. A lot of the operators, because they know that if they put their product on the market right now, they're going to be producing at a loss. They're going to just shut in those wells and just keep the reserves in the ground. Because who wants to be in business to make a loss? Nobody.
Yeah.
You're better off keeping it in the ground until the prices recover.
Yeah.
We could have a situation where prices start to recover, and then those companies now say, okay, we want to put it all on the market, and that could put another damper on the prices because of oversupply, because people are now trying to strive and get as much cash flow out as possible within the time frame that the prices are can accept it, can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, but the oil price conundrum, of course, and then you have the cartel in the Middle East, right? So that's also another angle. But I mean, OPEC is like you can't predict, and they handle so much in terms of the global. When you look at Russia and that part of the world, they handle a lot of the supply, so they can control the markets to their benefit. So, and I mean, I'm not that guy that can say, okay, oil is going to be $60 in a year, because everybody that has ever predicted that thing has been wrong.
Yeah. So you're an expert on Trinidad and Tobago. You said that you're responsible for the country of Trinidad and Tobago's yearly natural gas audits on behalf of the Trinidad Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, or the MEEI. And so how are things in Trinidad? We're here in Houston, but how are things in the Caribbean and Trinidad? And I know that you mentioned that Guyana and the Caribbean is continuing to produce oil in this current climate, even in spite of the low oil prices. So just can you comment on that and what you've seen going on in that region?
So, I mean, my first stint in Trinidad was when I was working with BP. I was actually an expat assigned to go and work in Trinidad. I did that for 2 years, and that's how I kind of became involved in Trinidad, as in my career. And I would say Trinidad the Caribbean is an emerging market. There's a lot of potential in the Caribbean, a lot. And Trinidad happens to be at the forefront of oil and gas in the Caribbean, because they're right next to Venezuela. Unfortunately, Venezuela hasn't done too well, so they're kind of reaping the rewards of Venezuela's bad luck, so to say. Because since it's just neighboring to it, a lot of people coming in from Venezuela to kind of even reside in Trinidad. And then there's a lot of opportunities that Venezuela would be able to take advantage of, but since they're in that economic situation they're in, they're passing it up to a small country like Trinidad. And Trinidad is just about 1.2, 1.5 million people. So it's a fairly small country. And the bulk of the production is gas. And there's a lot of potential for the country. There's a lot of very smart people there. I tell people, I mean, people think of the Caribbean like it's some kind of third world thing, but in Trinidad, it's really just middle class, and most people are middle class because most people are educated. The country has done a really good job over the years, sending people to school, subsidizing tuition for colleges and stuff like that. So it's kind of helped to raise the general, literacy level of the population. So you see a lot of good talent, a lot of strong talent in that region. Now, Guyana, which is like a country, just neighboring country to them, they're not as developed as Trinidad. And ExxonMobil, they made those huge oil discoveries in Guyana, and they're starting to produce. Some people argue that, okay, since the prices are very low right now, why would you want to be producing the country's reserves, the country's resources into a soft oil price market? But what some people fail to realize is Guyana doesn't have the expertise that a place like Trinidad does. So in as much when an operator comes into a country like, Nigeria or Trinidad or like a developing country, so to speak, their mandate is to develop the people, the human capital in those countries. So even though, yes, they're producing oil at very low prices relative to what they would have predicted when they started the project, but they're growing the people, they're developing expertise within the country, and that takes time because this is the long-term game. This is not some, 5 years you're out. This is a 50-year kind of look. So you need people to be able to develop and manage those resources over the long term. Yeah. So I mean, Guyana hopefully will probably be another big, and they'll help to even grow the Caribbean even more. And I can only wish them all the success in the world because they need it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and your expertise there is super valuable, and it's just it's hard to imagine being a developing country and having that kind of a challenge right now of what do you do because you want to develop the talent, but then the prices are low, and you don't want to just tell everybody, okay, we're just going to stop for now. But that being said, so you're also you're from West Africa, and so you're working over here and you're focused on Trinidad, but what would you say emerging African countries should do in order to succeed in their E&P ventures? And do you have any advice, watching Guyana, what do you recommend for the emerging African countries in this climate?
That's another loaded question.
Another loaded question for you.
That's another loaded question. I'm from Nigeria, born and raised. Yeah, I mean, I actually did my undergrad in Nigeria, like you might have read out earlier on to the audience. And the problem with Africa, West Africa, for the most part, is the endemic corruption. Yeah, I mean, I could. You don't want to put me on my soapbox on that because I could talk on forever about it. So what those emerging countries need to do, the ones where talk about Ghana, where the Jubilee field is discovered. They just need to work together and learn from the mistakes that that have been made in countries like Nigeria. Mm-hmm. The revenue gets generated, but just a select few people sit on that. They just put it in their private bank accounts, and the rest of the people they leave the masses impoverished. So things like that needs to be checked. There needs to be checks and balances along the entire supply chain to ensure that people are not looting the government's resources. Yeah. And so again, you know what they've done bad. So you try and make sure you don't repeat the bad things that they've done. And then you also look at the good things that they have done. In a country like Trinidad, for instance, they do a lot, they pride themselves in having local content, to where instead of importing a lot of a facility and items like that from Asia, they fabricate everything in Trinidad, and it's world class. It's not like substandard. It's world class, facilities. So learning from what countries like Trinidad have done correctly could help to help them make sure that they have a local content, and deliver product at the world's highest standards in terms of oil and gas facilities and things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's my little take on that. But corruption in West Africa is a big problem. It's unfortunate, but it's. I would just hope that they reduce it, because it may never go away. But at least if it's reduced, that will be better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you see that type of thing happening in the Caribbean, in like somewhere like Guyana, or is it not quite so much a problem there?
I would say it's not as much of a problem. The Caribbean is a lot more transparent versus Africa. So they have a little bit more, the FCPA and all those Foreign Corrupt Practices Acts, those rules, they're kind of scared of those rules there, So over there, it's not as bad.
Okay.
I would hope that, but Guyana's problem is the politics, the geopolitics, because every time they have a ruling party, once that ruling party leaves, the 4 years they leave, the next party that comes over, they scrap all the policies that the previous administration put in place and start afresh. So you're always having to kickstart things every 4 years or every 6 years because of political interest. So that could be the one thing that could impact it. But in terms of the transparency and the the level of corruption in that region, is not as bad as you would find in a place like, I'd say, I always put Nigeria because I'm from Nigeria. That way people can't say I'm pointing at them. I'm from Nigeria and I know it's bad out there. So, but there's also a lot of good, because Nigeria's produced a lot of talent like myself. I mean, I'm from there, I went to school there, and I came out okay. So
you seem pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I think that just, it's hard to know. I mean, we have the same challenge here in the USA that, it's hard for companies even here to predict what's going to happen next when, in the US we've got, a presidential administration that changes every 4 years, and, Congress, people that change every 2 years. And, it's just hard to know from, when you do have evolving government, it's hard to really count on anything. I remember I heard T. Boone Pickens speak one time, and he was talking about the challenge of investing in renewables that, renewables rely heavily on government subsidies, or they at least did in the past. And, when you need to look at your economics in terms of, what's going to happen with the government in 5 or 10 years, and trying to predict that, it can be a very unpredictable factor in your risk analysis.
Yep.
But
that's true.
So you gave me a couple book recommendations that you mentioned, that you thought might be useful or interesting to our listeners here in this current interesting climate we are in. Can you recommend some books or resources that you think would be helpful right now?
So it's a tough time we're in, and a lot of people have been impacted because, with the job situations and things like that, because, companies are downsizing. Everybody's just trying to survive, really. I mean, so you can't really blame them. Everybody's trying to, it's a survival mode thing. So there's this book I read over the years. Most of the books, the really good books I have, I read them over and over. Just, they're like timeless books, right? So John C. Maxwell, it's a book called Failing Forward. So the fact that you fail doesn't mean, that's it. You have to learn from your mistakes, pick yourself up, and keep moving on. That's what that book really summarizes. But it's Failing Forward. I think it's a really good read. And you could actually, go on YouTube and, do the audio book on YouTube. That could be a good way to get that resource as well. And he has a podcast, the the John Maxwell Leadership Podcast. So that's something on Apple or whatever medium you use to listen to your podcast. That could be a good resource as well. So yeah, so those are. I mean, anything John C. Maxwell, I would subscribe to.
Yeah, that sounds like a great one, not just for business, but for life, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's a life.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show with us, Deji. Thank you for talking about your experiences and your thoughts on the current climate, both here in the US and abroad.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. And thank you to our listeners on the Oil and Gas Business Builders podcast. Thanks for listening, and please tune into the next episode.
All right.
All right.
Appreciate
Bye.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Zebra Marketing Solutions Oil and Gas Business Builders podcast. Join our Oil and Gas Business Builders groups on LinkedIn and Facebook, and see our videos on YouTube and on ogbbmedia.com. Visit zmsenergymarketing.com to learn more about how we can help you and your business design and implement a marketing strategy to retain and attract customers, grow revenues, and gain market share. Join us on the next episode for more great takeaways from business builders who are leading the way in the energy sector.